On a freezing winter night, a young black girl hurried home from school, cold and hungry. Passing through the park, she saw an old man, lost and shivering on a bench. While others walked by, she took off her only jacket, wrapped it around him, and brought him home to shelter. A few hours later, a knock at the door revealed a man, and what happened next would change the girl's life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The streetlights cast weak yellow circles on the wet pavement, each one growing dimmer as Aaliyah walked deeper into the forgotten side of Harborview City. Her breath came out in small puffs of white vapor, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around her 12-year-old frame. The jacket had been her mother's once, back when things were different, back when there was still hope that her father might come home from his third deployment. Aaliyah's sneakers squelched with each step. The left one had developed a hole near the toe 2 weeks ago, and tonight the December slush was finding its way inside. She shifted the canvas bag on her shoulder, feeling the weight of the aluminum cans she'd collected during her after-school rounds through the downtown business district. 15 cans today. Maybe enough for $1.50 if the recycling center wasn't being stingy again. The apartment building loomed ahead, its brick facade stained with years of neglect. Half the windows on the first floor were boarded up, and graffiti covered the metal door that served as the main entrance. Aaliyah fumbled for her key, her fingers numb from the cold, as she climbed the 3 flights to apartment 3B. The smell of mildew and something she couldn't identify grew stronger. "Mama, I'm home," she called softly as she turned the key. Her mother, Janet, looked up from the couch where she was helping 8-year-old Marcus with his homework. Dark circles ringed Janet's eyes, and her uniform from the diner where she worked double shifts was wrinkled and stained. "Baby, you're freezing," Janet said, standing up quickly. She rubbed Aaliyah's shoulders. "How many cans today?" 15. Aaliyah set the bag down carefully. "Mrs. Patterson at the law office saved some from their lunch meeting for me." Janet's face softened, but worry lines deepened around her eyes. "Aaliyah, honey, I don't want you thinking this is your job. You're supposed to be a kid." "I know, Mama." Aaliyah kicked off her wet shoes. "But every little bit helps, right?" Marcus looked up from his math worksheet. "Aaliyah, my teacher said kids in other countries have to work but not here. She said it's not fair when kids have to work here." Aaliyah felt something twist in her stomach. She sat down next to her little brother and ruffled his hair. "Well, Marcus, sometimes life isn't fair, but that doesn't mean we stop trying to make it better." Janet turned away, but not before Aaliyah caught the quick swipe of her hand across her eyes. Her mother had been doing that a lot lately. The next morning brought no relief from the cold. Aaliyah wrapped her scarf, another hand-me-down, around her neck twice and grabbed her backpack. The canvas bag for collecting cans went into her backpack. She'd learned to be discreet about it after some kids at school started calling her the can girl. The walk to school took her through the nicer part of town, where the trees were bare but well maintained, and the sidewalks didn't have cracks that could swallow your foot. She was cutting through Riverside Park when she heard the voices. Well, look what we have here." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice. Madison Kensington, whose father owned 3 car dealerships and whose mother hosted charity galas that raised more money in one night than Aaliyah's family saw in a year. Madison stepped out from behind a large oak tree, flanked by 2 other girls from school. All 3 wore North Face jackets that probably cost more than Aaliyah's family paid in rent. "Out collecting your little cans again," Madison's voice dripped with fake sweetness. "That's so industrious of you." "I'm just walking to school," Aaliyah said, keeping her voice steady. "With your garbage bag." This came from Brittany, one of Madison's followers. She pointed at Aaliyah's backpack. "We saw you yesterday, digging through the trash behind Romano's restaurant." Heat flooded Aaliyah's cheeks. "I wasn't digging through trash. People leave clean cans on top sometimes." "Oh, people," Madison laughed, and the sound made Aaliyah's skin crawl. "You mean the staff felt sorry for you? That's charity, sweetie. My mom always says charity cases should be grateful and not make a scene." The words hit Aaliyah like physical blows. She thought of her mother's voice the night before. You know how people look at us, baby, they're always waiting for us to mess up, to prove we're what they think we are. So we have to be twice as good, twice as respectful, twice as quiet. Aaliyah straightened her shoulders. I need to get to school. Of course you do. Madison stepped aside with exaggerated politeness. Wouldn't want you to be late for your free lunch. As Aaliyah walked past them, she heard Brittany whisper loudly, I can't believe they let people like that into our school. Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists, but she kept walking. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would not prove them right about anything. The school day passed in a blur. Aaliyah threw herself into her classwork, answering questions in English class and solving math problems with a determination that bordered on fierce. Education was her way out. It had to be. After school, instead of taking her usual route through the business district, she decided to walk home through Riverside Park. The cold seemed less bitter in the open space, and she needed time to think before facing her mother's worried questions about her day. The park was nearly empty. A few joggers passed by in their expensive athletic gear, but otherwise, Aaliyah had the walking path to herself. She was approaching the small pond in the center of the park when she saw him. An elderly white man sat on a bench, wearing nothing but a thin shirt and slacks. He was shivering violently, his hands clasped in his lap. His gray hair was disheveled, and he kept looking around with an expression of complete confusion. Aaliyah slowed her pace. Something about the man's posture, the lost look in his eyes, reminded her of a stray dog she'd once found. Vulnerable and scared, she approached carefully. Sir, are you okay? The man looked up at her, and Aaliyah was struck by how empty his eyes seemed. Not mean or cold, just absent. The man's voice was trembling as badly as his body. Where am I? You're in Riverside Park, Aaliyah said gently. In Harborview City, are you lost? The man stared at her for a long moment. I was walking, I think. But I can't remember where I was going. Aaliyah glanced around the park. The temperature was dropping as the sun set behind the bare trees. This man wouldn't last long out here dressed like that. Do you have family? Someone who might be looking for you? Family. The man's brow furrowed deeply. There's someone, a boy. No, a man now. David. My son David. His face cleared slightly. Yes, David, that's good, Aaliyah said. Do you know David's phone number? The confusion returned to the man's face. Phone number. I don't think so. Aaliyah looked down at her thin jacket, then at the man's bare arms. Without hesitation, she slipped off her jacket and draped it around his shoulders. Oh no, sweetheart, the man protested weakly. You'll be cold, I'll be okay. Aaliyah lied. The wind cut through her long-sleeved shirt immediately. You need it more than I do. The man pulled the jacket tighter around himself. You're very kind, your parents raised you right. Something about the way he said it, with such genuine warmth, made Aaliyah's throat tighten. Thank you, sir. What's your name? My name. The man paused, struggling. Robert Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, I think we should get you somewhere warm. Can you walk with me? Robert nodded slowly, and allowed Aaliyah to help him to his feet. He was unsteady but mobile. As they walked, Aaliyah noticed something glinting on his wrist, a medical bracelet. Mr. Whitmore, may I look at your bracelet? Robert looked down at his wrist as if seeing the bracelet for the first time. Oh, yes, I think someone said I should wear this. Aaliyah read the engraved text, Robert Whitmore, Alzheimer's disease. Emergency contact David Whitmore. Below that was a phone number. Mr. Whitmore, I found your son's phone number, Aaliyah said. But first, let's get you somewhere warm. I live nearby. As they walked slowly toward her apartment building, Aaliyah's mind raced. Her mother would probably freak out about bringing a stranger home. They barely had enough food for themselves, but looking at Robert, who kept muttering David's name under his breath like a prayer, she knew she couldn't leave him in the park. The lobby of the apartment building was at least warmer than outside, but not by much. As they climbed the stairs, Robert held onto the railing with both hands, and Aaliyah stayed close in case he stumbled. Mama, Aaliyah called as she opened the apartment door. I need to show you something. Janet appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, dish towel in hand. When she saw Robert, her eyes widened. "Aaliyah, what mama? This is Mr. Whitmore. I found him in the park. He has Alzheimer's and he's lost." He was freezing. Janet's expression went through several rapid changes, surprise, concern, and then something softer. She looked at Robert, who was standing uncertainly in their doorway, wearing Aaliyah's thin jacket, and shivering despite the relative warmth of the apartment. "Come in, Mr. Whitmore," Janet said, stepping aside. "Let's get you warm." Marcus looked up from his spot on the couch, eyes wide. "Who's that?" "A friend who needs our help," Aaliyah said simply. Janet guided Robert to the couch, and wrapped their one good blanket around his shoulders. "Aaliyah, get him some water. Marcus, honey, can you turn the heat up a little?" "The heat's already as high as we can afford," Marcus said quietly. Janet shot him a look, but Robert didn't seem to notice the exchange. He was looking around the small apartment with confusion. "This isn't where am I?" "You're safe," Aaliyah said, sitting down beside him with a glass of water. "Mr. Whitmore, I found your son's phone number on your bracelet. Would it be okay if I called him?" Robert's face lit up. "David, you'll call David?" "Yes, sir." Aaliyah pulled out her mother's old flip phone, and carefully dialed the number from the bracelet. It rang twice before a man's voice answered. "Hello, hi, is this David Whitmore?" "Yes, who is this?" The man sounded tired, stressed. Aaliyah took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitmore, my name is Aaliyah Johnson. I think I found your father." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "My father, Robert Whitmore." "Yes, sir, he's here with me. He says his name is Robert, and he's been asking for David." "Oh my God." David's voice broke. "Where is he? Is he okay?" "We've been searching for him for 6 hours. The police search teams." "He's safe," Aaliyah said quickly. "He was in Riverside Park, but he's warm now. He's confused, but he's not hurt." Riverside Park. That's 15 miles from his care facility. "How did he?" David's voice trailed off. "Never mind. Where are you? I'll come get him right now." Aaliyah gave him their address, feeling strange about inviting this stranger to their run-down apartment building. But when David heard the address, he didn't comment on the neighborhood. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Miss Johnson, was it? I can't thank you enough. We thought he might be." "He's going to be okay, Mr. Whitmore." While they waited, Janet heated up some canned soup, their dinner for the night, and gave Robert a bowl. He ate slowly, methodically, occasionally looking around the room with that same lost expression. "You have a beautiful family," he said to Janet at one point. "Thank you," Janet replied. "You must be very proud of your son David." "David," Robert smiled, the first genuine smile Aaliyah had seen from him. "He's a good boy, works very hard, always calling to check on me." Marcus had been unusually quiet, but now he got up from his spot on the floor and approached Robert shyly. "Mr. Whitmore, do you want to see my drawing? I made it at school today." Robert studied Marcus's picture, a stick figure family in front of a house with smoke coming from the chimney. "This is very good. You're quite the artist." "That's our family," Marcus explained, pointing to each figure. "That's Mama, that's me, and that's Ali. She takes care of everybody." Aaliyah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Marcus, she does," Marcus insisted. "She helps me with homework, and she finds cans to help with money, and she makes sure I eat before she does when we don't have enough food." "Marcus, that's enough," Janet said quietly, but Robert was looking at Aaliyah with a new expression. "You collect cans?" he asked. Aaliyah nodded, embarrassed. "That's honest work," Robert said firmly. "Nothing wrong with honest work, no matter what anyone tells you." Before Aaliyah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Janet looked through the peephole before opening it. The man who stood in their doorway was clearly David Whitmore. He had his father's bone structure, but where Robert seemed fragile and lost, David radiated success and confidence. His wool coat probably cost more than Janet made in a month, and his shoes were the kind Aaliyah had only seen in magazine ads. "Dad," David pushed past Janet and knelt beside the couch where Robert sat. "Dad, are you okay?" We've been so worried." Robert looked at David with sudden recognition. "David, there you are. I was looking for you." "I know, Dad, I know." David's voice was thick with emotion. He hugged his father carefully, as if Robert might break. "You scared us. You can't just walk away from the facility like that." "Facility?" Robert looked confused again. I wanted to see you." David closed his eyes briefly, composing himself. Then he stood and turned to face Aaliyah and her family. "I'm David Whitmore," he said, extending his hand to Janet. "I cannot thank you enough for taking care of my father." "Of course," Janet said, shaking his hand. "Anyone would have done the same." David looked around the small apartment, taking in the second-hand furniture, the careful way everything was arranged to make the most of the tiny space, the elementary school artwork taped to the walls. His gaze settled on Aaliyah. "You're the one who found him." "Yes, sir. And you gave him your jacket." Aaliyah glanced down at herself. She was still in just her long-sleeved shirt, and she realized she was shivering slightly. He was cold. David stared at her for a long moment. "How old are you?" 12. 12. David shook his head slowly. "You're 12 years old, and you saw a stranger in the park and decided to help him." "He needed help," Aaliyah said simply. David looked at his father, who was wearing the thin jacket and looking more alert now that David was there. "Dad, do you remember this young lady? She's very kind," Robert said, "shared her coat with me, and her family gave me soup." David's eyes moved to the empty soup bowl, then to the small pot on the stove. He seemed to realize that they had shared their own dinner with his father. "How much do I owe you?" he asked Janet. "For the food, for taking care of him." "Nothing," Janet said firmly. "We don't charge people for being decent." "But surely." "Nothing," Janet repeated. David looked around the apartment again, his expression thoughtful. "My father has Alzheimer's," he said quietly. "He lives in a memory care facility about 20 minutes from here. It's the best in the state, but sometimes he gets confused and wanders off. We've never had him get this far before." "How did he end up in the park?" Aaliyah asked. "We think he was trying to find his old house. He and my mother lived about 10 blocks from that park for 30 years before she passed. Sometimes he forgets she's gone and tries to go home to her." Robert looked up at the mention of his wife. "Margaret, is Margaret here?" David's face tightened with pain. "No, Dad, Mom's not here. Remember, she's been gone for 3 years now." "Oh," Robert's face fell. "I forget sometimes." "I know, Dad, it's okay." David helped his father to his feet, supporting him gently. "We should get you back to the facility. The nurses are worried sick." As they prepared to leave, David turned back to Aaliyah. "What's your full name?" "Aaliyah Johnson." "Aaliyah Johnson." David repeated it like he was memorizing it. "I want you to know that what you did today, not many people would have done that. Not many adults would have done that. She's special," Janet said, putting her hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. "Always has been." David reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. "Please let me give you something for your kindness." "We told you, we don't want money for helping someone," Janet said. "Not payment," David said quickly. "A thank you gift, for my peace of mind." He held out several bills, but Janet shook her head. David looked at the money, then at Aaliyah, who was still shivering slightly in her thin shirt. "What if I bought Aaliyah a new coat?" he asked. "To replace the one she gave my father." Before Janet could object, Aaliyah spoke up. "That's very kind, but I'll get my jacket back when Mr. Whitmore doesn't need it anymore." David smiled, the first real smile Aaliyah had seen from him. "You know what? You're right, Dad, you should keep that jacket. It brought you to some very good people." Robert looked down at the jacket, then at Aaliyah. "Are you sure it's yours?" "I'm sure, Mr. Whitmore. It looks good on you." David helped his father toward the door, but paused in the doorway. "Aaliyah, what school do you go to?" "Harborview Middle School." David nodded. "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" The question caught Aaliyah off guard. Most adults didn't ask her about the future. They were too focused on the present problems. "I want to be a lawyer," she said, "to help people who can't help themselves." "A lawyer." David considered this. "That's a good goal. It takes a lot of hard work and education, I know, but I'm willing to work hard. David studied her face for a moment. I believe you are. After they left, the apartment felt strangely empty. Marcus had gone to bed, and Janet was cleaning up the soup bowls. Mama, Aaliyah said, was it okay that I brought him here? Janet paused in her washing. Baby, you did exactly the right thing. That man could have died out there in the cold. But we barely have enough for us. There's always enough to share kindness, Janet said, and sometimes kindness is more important than anything else we can give. Aaliyah nodded, but she was thinking about David's expensive coat and the way he'd looked around their apartment. She wondered what he thought of them, whether he'd go home to his big house and tell people about the poor family who helped his father. 3 days later, Aaliyah was walking home from school when she saw the same black sedan parked outside their apartment building. Her heart rate picked up as she climbed the stairs. Had something happened to Mr. Whitmore? She opened the apartment door to find David sitting at their small kitchen table with her mother. Both of them had serious expressions. "Hi, sweetheart," Janet said. "Mr. Whitmore wanted to talk to us." David stood up when Aaliyah entered. "Hello, Aaliyah. How was school?" "Fine," she said, cautiously. "Is Mr. Whitmore okay?" "He's doing well. The doctors adjusted his medication, and he seems more settled now." David gestured to the chair across from him. "Can you sit down? I'd like to talk to you about something." Aaliyah sat, her backpack still on her shoulders. Janet looked nervous. "Aaliyah," David began, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night, about the kind of person you are. I just did what anyone would do." "No," David said firmly. "You didn't. I've spent the last 3 days asking myself how many people would have stopped to help a confused old man in the park. How many 12-year-olds would have given away their only jacket and brought a stranger into their home to share their family's dinner." Aaliyah glanced at her mother, who was watching David intently. "The answer," David continued, "is not many. What you did required courage, compassion, and selflessness. Those aren't common qualities, especially in someone so young." "Mr. Whitmore," Janet said slowly, "what are you getting at?" David leaned forward. "I want to help Aaliyah achieve her goal of becoming a lawyer." "What do you mean?" Aaliyah asked. "I mean I want to pay for your education. All of it. Middle school, high school, college, law school, everything." The kitchen fell silent. Aaliyah felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. That's very generous," Janet said carefully, "but we can't accept charity." "It's not charity," David said quickly. "It's an investment. Aaliyah has something rare, a genuine desire to help others, combined with the intelligence and determination to make it happen. The world needs more lawyers like that." "But you barely know me," Aaliyah said. "I know enough. I know you saw someone who needed help, and you helped them, even though it cost you something. I know you're already thinking about how to use your education to help other people, and I know you're the kind of person who returns lost fathers to their sons." David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've already spoken to the admissions office at Harborview Academy. It's the best private school in the city. They have an opening for next semester." Janet's eyes widened. "Mr. Whitmore, that school costs $45,000 a year," David finished. "I know. I'm prepared to pay for that, plus college, plus law school, plus whatever additional support Aaliyah needs to succeed." Aaliyah stared at the folder. Harborview Academy was where kids like Madison Kensington went. She'd walked past it sometimes and seen the students in their pristine uniforms, carrying expensive backpacks, getting picked up in luxury cars. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because 3 nights ago, my father wandered away from his care facility and got lost. He could have died of exposure, or gotten hit by a car, or worse. Instead he met a 12-year-old girl who treated him with more kindness and respect than many adults would have shown. That girl saved his life, and in doing so she gave me the gift of more time with my father." David's voice grew thick with emotion. "My dad is all I have left, Aaliyah. My mother died 3 years ago, and I never had children. Losing him would have destroyed me. You prevented that." "But what if I fail?" Aaliyah asked. "What if I'm not smart enough for that school? You are, David said with certainty. But more than that, you're good enough, and that matters more than being smart. Janet had tears in her eyes. This is too much. We can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. More than that, I'm insisting. David looked between them. There's one condition though. Aaliyah's heart sank. Of course there was a catch. I want your mother to quit her job at the diner. What? Janet said. I want to offer you a position at my company. Administrative assistant, with full benefits and a salary that will allow you to support your family without working double shifts. Your kids need you home more. Janet stared at him. Your company, Whitmore Industries. We develop affordable housing. Ironic, I know, considering where you live now, but we're always looking for people who understand what it means to stretch a dollar and make hard choices. Aaliyah looked at her mother, who seemed to be struggling to process what David was offering. Mr. Whitmore, Janet said slowly, this feels like too much. We helped your father because it was the right thing to do, not because we expected anything in return. I know, that's exactly why I want to help you. David closed the folder and slid it across the table. Take some time to think about it, talk it over, but please don't say no just because you think you don't deserve it. That night, after David left, Aaliyah and her family sat around the kitchen table staring at the folder. Mama, Marcus said, what's a private school? It's a school where rich kids go. Aaliyah said, are we rich now? Janet laughed, but it sounded more like crying. No baby, we're not rich, but someone very generous wants to help Ali get a good education. That's good, right? Marcus asked. I don't know, Aaliyah admitted. What if the kids there don't like me because I'm different? Baby, Janet said, taking Aaliyah's hand, you've been dealing with kids who don't like you because you're different your whole life. The difference is, this time you'll have the same opportunities they have. But what if I don't fit in? Then you'll make your own place to fit, Janet said firmly. You think Mr. Whitmore would offer this if he didn't believe in you? Aaliyah thought about this. Do you think Dad would want me to take it? Janet's expression grew soft and sad. Your daddy always said you were going to change the world. He'd want you to have every chance to do that. What about you working for Mr. Whitmore? Is that weird? Honestly, I'm scared, Janet admitted. But I'm more scared of staying where we are, watching you collect cans to help with rent when you should be focused on homework. 2 weeks later, Aaliyah stood in front of the imposing brick facade of Harborview Academy, wearing a brand new uniform that David had insisted on buying. The skirt was crisp and navy blue, the white shirt was actually white instead of grayish from too many washings, and the blazer had the school crest embroidered in gold thread. Her new backpack, leather instead of canvas, felt strange on her shoulders. Inside were notebooks, pens, and textbooks that she owned instead of borrowed from the school's damaged collection. You ready for this? Janet asked. She was dressed in professional clothes for her first day at Whitmore Industries. No, Aaliyah said honestly. Good. If you were ready it wouldn't be much of a challenge. Aaliyah walked through the front doors of the academy and into a world she'd only imagined. The hallways were wide and bright, lined with trophy cases and framed photos of students at various academic competitions. Everything smelled new and clean. Her first class was Advanced English, and she found herself in a room with 15 other students who looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. The teacher, Miss Richardson, was young and enthusiastic. Class, we have a new student joining us. Aaliyah Johnson, would you like to tell us a little about yourself? Aaliyah stood up, aware that every eye in the room was on her. I'm Aaliyah, I transferred from Harborview Middle School. I'm interested in becoming a lawyer. Wonderful, Miss Richardson said. And what draws you to law? I want to help people who can't help themselves, Aaliyah said, echoing what she'd told David. A boy in the back row snorted quietly. Aaliyah caught the sound and felt her cheeks warm. That's a noble goal, Miss Richardson said. Please take a seat. As Aaliyah sat down she heard whispers behind her. Scholarship kid. Charity case. I heard her family lives in the projects. Aaliyah kept her eyes forward and tried to focus on Miss Richardson's lesson about character development in literature. She thought about her mother's words, you don't need to prove anything with words. Prove it with how you live. At lunch, Alepanya sat alone at a table in the corner of the pristine cafeteria. The food was better than anything they served at her old school, but she barely tasted it. She was too aware of the conversations happening around her. "Did you see her shoes?" someone was saying. "They're not even real leather. I heard David Whitmore is paying her tuition. My dad knows him from the country club. Why would he do that? Guilt probably. Rich people always feel guilty about something." Alepanya put down her fork. The food suddenly tasted like cardboard. "Mind if I sit here?" Alepanya looked up to see a girl about her age with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Her uniform was perfect like everyone else's, but something about her seemed different. "Sure," Alepanya said, "I'm Sarah Chen." The girl said, sitting down across from her. "I heard you're interested in law." "Yeah. That's cool. My mom's a lawyer. Immigration law mostly. She helps families stay together." "That sounds important." "It is." Sarah opened her lunch, a bento box that looked like a work of art. "You know those girls over there? The ones whispering about you?" Alepanya glanced over at the table Sarah was indicating. 3 girls who looked like younger versions of Madison Kensington were staring in their direction. "What about them?" "They said the same things about me when I started here 2 years ago. Apparently my family's the wrong kind of rich." Sarah made air quotes. "New money, immigrant parents, actually worked for what we have instead of inheriting it." "Did it get better?" "Eventually, but not because they changed their minds about me. Because I stopped caring what they thought." Sarah bit into her sandwich. "The thing is, this place has some amazing teachers and opportunities. Don't let the mean girls ruin that for you." For the first time since arriving at the academy, Alepanya felt like she could breathe. Over the next few weeks, Alepanya threw herself into her studies with the same determination she'd once applied to collecting cans. The coursework was challenging, but not impossible. Her teachers began to notice her contributions to class discussions, her thoughtful written work, and her willingness to help other students who were struggling. But the social aspects remained difficult. Groups of students would stop talking when she approached. In gym class, she was often the last person chosen for teams. During group projects, she frequently found herself working alone or with other outsiders like Sarah. The worst part came during a current events discussion in social studies class. The topic was poverty in America, and their teacher, Mr. Davis, had assigned students to research different aspects of the issue. "Alepanya," Mr. Davis said, "since you have some personal experience with this topic, would you like to share your research on food insecurity?" Alepanya felt 20 pairs of eyes focus on her. The room went completely silent. "Personal experience?" asked Blake Morrison, one of the boys who'd been particularly cold to her. "What do you mean?" Mr. Davis seemed to realize his mistake. "I just meant that is, he means she's poor," said another student. "Like actually poor. Is that true?" Blake asked, looking directly at Alaya. "Are you here on charity?" Alepanya felt her face burning. She could lie, make up some story about her family's circumstances, try to fit in. But then she thought about her mother working double shifts at the diner, about Marcus asking if they were rich now, about Mr. Whitmore sitting confused and cold in the park. "Yes," she said clearly. "Mr. Whitmore is paying for my education because I helped his father when he was lost. And yes, my family struggles financially. But that doesn't make me less capable of learning or contributing to this class." The silence stretched on. Some students looked uncomfortable, others seemed satisfied to have their suspicions confirmed. Furthermore, Alepanya continued, standing up, "I've experienced food insecurity firsthand. I know what it's like to count out change to buy groceries, to water down milk to make it last longer, to tell your little brother that you're not hungry so he can eat more. If that makes me different from everyone else in this room, then maybe this class needs someone different." She sat back down, her heart pounding. Mr. Davis cleared his throat. "Thank you, Alaya, for that honest perspective. That kind of real-world understanding is exactly what makes for meaningful discussion." Blake Morrison was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. After class, he caught up with her in the hallway. "Hey," he said, that took guts." Alepanya wasn't sure if he was complimenting or mocking her. "Okay, I'm serious. Most people would have lied or made excuses. You just owned it. It's not something to be ashamed of," Alepanya said, though part of her still felt embarrassed. No, it's not. Blake paused. Look, I may have judged you wrong. Want to sit with me and my friends at lunch today? Alepanya studied his face, looking for signs of a trap or joke. She found only what seemed like genuine regret. Maybe, she said, but I already promised to sit with Sarah. Bring her too. That lunch period marked a turning point. Blake's acceptance seemed to signal to other students that Aliyah was worth knowing. Slowly, tentatively, she began to make friends. But the real test came 2 months into the semester, when Aliyah witnessed something that reminded her why she was really there. She was walking to her locker after school when she heard crying coming from an empty classroom. Peeking inside, she saw a younger student, maybe a 7th grader, sitting at a desk with tears streaming down his face. Are you okay? Alepanya asked, stepping into the room. The boy looked up, startled. He was small for his age, with thick glasses and clothes that didn't quite fit right. Alepanya recognized the signs of a family stretching their budget for a private school education. I'm fine, he said quickly, wiping his eyes. You don't look fine. What's wrong? The boy, his name tag said Jamie Chen, and Aliyah realized he must be Sarah's younger brother, hesitated before answering. Some kids took my lunch money. Again. How long has this been happening? Since school started. They said if I tell anyone they'll make it worse. Alepanya felt familiar anger rising in her chest. Who's taking your money? I can't tell you that. Jamie, right. I'm Aliyah. I'm friends with your sister Sarah. Jamie's eyes widened. You know Sarah? She was one of the first people to be kind to me here. And I know she'd want to help you with this problem. But they said they'd make it worse if you told. But what they're doing is already wrong, and it's not going to stop unless someone stops them. Aliyah sat down in the desk next to Jamie's. When I was at my old school, there were kids who picked on me too. They called me names, made fun of my clothes, treated me like I didn't belong. You know what I learned? Jamie shook his head. Bullies pick on people they think won't fight back. They target kids who seem alone or different or scared. But the minute you show them you're not going to be their victim, they usually move on to someone else. But what if they don't? What if it makes things worse? Then we make sure you're not facing it alone. The next day, Aliyah positioned herself near Jamie's usual lunch spot and waited. Sure enough, 3 8th grade boys approached him as he sat eating his sandwich. Hey, Chen, the tallest one said. You got our money. I don't have any money today. Jamie said quietly. That's too bad. Guess we'll have to take your lunch instead. Actually, Aliyah said, standing up from her table. I think Jamie's going to keep his lunch today. The 3 boys turned to look at her. The leader, a stocky kid with an aggressive posture, stepped forward. This isn't your business, scholarship girl. It became my business when you decided to steal from a 7th grader. We're not stealing, we're collecting a fee. For protection. Protection from what? The boy gestured vaguely. From getting picked on by other kids. So you're picking on him to protect him from getting picked on. That makes perfect sense. Other students were starting to notice the confrontation. Aliyah could see Sarah approaching from across the cafeteria, along with Blake and a few other friends. Look, the bully said, just mind your own business and walk away. Or what? The question hung in the air. The boy clearly hadn't expected to be challenged so directly. Or we'll tell everyone about your family, about how you live in the projects and your mom works at a diner. Go ahead, Aliyah said calmly. I already told everyone myself in Mr. Davis's class. What else you got? The boy looked frustrated and uncertain. His 2 friends were glancing around nervously as more students gathered to watch. Everything okay here? Sarah had arrived, flanked by Blake and 3 other students from their grade. Just some boys who think stealing lunch money makes them tough, Aliyah said. That's not what we heard. Blake said, stepping up beside Aliyah. His presence seemed to deflate the bully's confidence considerably. Blake was popular, athletic, and from one of the wealthier families at the school. We weren't stealing anything, the lead bully said, but his voice had lost its aggressive edge. Really? Sarah pulled out her phone. Because I just recorded you demanding money from my little brother. I'm sure the administration would be very interested in seeing this. The 3 boys exchanged glances. They were clearly outnumbered now and by students with more social power than they had. Whatever, the leader said. This is stupid. As they walked away, Jamie looked up at Aaliyah with something like awe. How did you know they'd back down? I didn't, Aaliyah admitted. But I knew they were counting on you being too scared to get help. Bullies hate witnesses. Thank you, Jamie said quietly. Don't thank me yet. They might try again when I'm not around. What should I do if they do? Tell a teacher. Tell your sister, tell me, but don't face it alone. Word of the cafeteria confrontation spread quickly through the school. By the end of the week, 3 more students had approached Aaliyah about bullying situations. She found herself becoming an unofficial advocate for kids who were being picked on or excluded. It wasn't a role she'd sought, but it felt natural. She understood what it was like to feel powerless, to be treated as less than other people. And she was learning that having allies made all the difference. Her grades remained excellent, but more importantly, she was discovering what kind of lawyer she wanted to become. Not just someone who helped people navigate the legal system, but someone who stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. 3 months after the cafeteria incident, David Whitmore requested a meeting with Aaliyah and her mother. They met at his office, a gleaming space on the 40th floor of a downtown building. How are you adjusting to the academy? David asked as they sat in his conference room. It's challenging, Aaliyah said. But good challenging. I've been getting reports from your teachers. They're very impressed with your work. Thank you. But more than that, I've been hearing about other things you've been doing. Standing up for students who are being bullied, organizing study groups that include kids who are struggling, starting a food drive for families in need. Aaliyah glanced at her mother, who smiled proudly. Those things just seemed important, Aaliyah said. They are important. They're also exactly what I hoped would happen when I decided to invest in your education. David leaned forward. Aaliyah, I want to show you something. He led them to the window, which offered a panoramic view of the city. Far below, Aaliyah could see the neighborhood where she used to live, the park where she'd found Robert, the streets where she'd collected cans. What do you see when you look down there? David asked. Home, Aaliyah said simply. And what do you think when you look at it from up here? Aaliyah considered the question. I think about how different things look depending on where you're standing. From up here the problems seem smaller, more manageable, but I know they're not really smaller. They just look that way because of the distance. David nodded approvingly. That's exactly right. A lot of people who end up in positions like this, he gestured around his office, they forget what things look like from down there. They start to think that because the problems look smaller, they are smaller. But you didn't forget. I tried not to. But I'll be honest, it's easy to lose perspective when you're surrounded by success and comfort. That's why what you did for my father meant so much to me. You reminded me what real character looks like. David turned back to face them. There's something else I want to discuss. I've been thinking about your future beyond high school. I still want to go to law school, Aaliyah said. I know, and I still want to help you get there. But I've been talking to some colleagues, and there's an opportunity I'd like you to consider. He handed Aaliyah a brochure. It's a summer internship program for high school students interested in law. You'd work with a legal aid society, helping families with housing disputes, immigration issues, things like that. Aaliyah flipped through the brochure, her eyes widening. This looks incredible. It would give you real experience with the kind of law you say you want to practice. And it pays a small stipend, so you'd be earning money while learning. I'd love to do this. There's one catch, David said with a smile. The program is competitive. You'd need to write an essay about why you want to pursue law and what you hope to accomplish. I can do that. I know you can. But I want you to really think about it. Don't just tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them your truth. That night, Aaliyah sat at the small desk in her bedroom. They'd moved to a better apartment after her mother started working for David, and stared at a blank piece of paper. How could she explain what she wanted to accomplish when she was still figuring it out herself? She thought about Jamie Chen, safely eating his lunch now without fear. She thought about Sarah, who'd faced her own challenges as an outsider. She thought about Robert Whitmore, confused and lost in the park. She thought about her mother, no longer working double shifts, able to help Marcus with homework in the evenings. And she thought about the bullies at her old school, the ones who'd called her the can girl and made her feel small and ashamed. She began to write, "My name is Elijah Johnson, and I want to become a lawyer because I understand what it feels like to be powerless. I know what it's like to be judged by where you live, what you wear, or how much money your family has. I know what it's like to work hard and still struggle, to do the right thing and still be treated poorly, to need help and not know where to find it. But I also know what it's like when someone chooses to see your worth instead of your circumstances. I know what it's like when someone stands up for you when you can't stand up for yourself. I know what it's like when someone gives you opportunities you never thought you'd have. I want to become a lawyer so I can be that person for others. I want to represent families facing eviction, children dealing with bullying, elderly people who are confused and vulnerable. I want to stand up in courtrooms and say, this person matters. This person deserves justice. This person deserves to be heard. Some people pursue law because they want power, or prestige or money. I pursue it because I want to use whatever power I gain to lift up people who have none. I learned this lesson in a park on a cold December night, when I met an old man who was lost and scared. Helping him didn't benefit me in any way, it cost me my jacket and my family's dinner. But it was still the right thing to do. That's the kind of lawyer I want to be, the kind who does the right thing, even when it costs something, especially when it costs something. I believe the law should protect the vulnerable, not just the powerful. I believe justice means ensuring that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. And I believe that every person, regardless of their race, their income, their age or their circumstances, deserves to have someone fight for them. That's what I want to accomplish as a lawyer. I want to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. And I want to do it because it's right, not because it's easy or profitable or popular. That's my truth. Elijah was accepted into the summer program, along with just 15 other students from across the state. On her first day at the legal aid office, she was assigned to work with Maria Santos, a housing attorney who'd been practicing for 12 years. "Tell me why you're here," Maria said as they sat in her cluttered office. "I want to help people. Everyone says that. Why do you really want to practice law?" Elijah thought about the question. "Because I've needed help and I know what it feels like when no one's willing to give it to you." Maria studied her for a moment. "How old are you?" 15. "When you were 12, what was your biggest worry?" "Whether we'd have enough money for groceries that week, and now, whether I'll be good enough to deserve the opportunities I've been given." Maria leaned back in her chair. "Those are very different worries." "Yes, ma'am. The first one is about survival. The second one is about purpose. That's growth." Over the course of the summer, Elijah worked on cases involving tenant rights, immigration assistance, and family law. She helped Maria interview clients, research legal precedents, and prepare court documents. She also learned about the limitations of the legal system, how many people couldn't afford representation, how long cases took to resolve, how often justice was delayed or denied. One case particularly affected her. A family of 4 was facing eviction from their apartment because of a rent increase they couldn't afford. The landlord was within his legal rights to raise the rent, but the family, a single mother with 3 young children, would be homeless if they had to move. "There has to be something we can do," Elijah said to Maria after they'd met with the client. "We can help her look for new housing, apply for emergency assistance, maybe negotiate a payment plan with the landlord," Maria said. "But legally he can raise the rent. That doesn't seem fair." Fair and legal aren't always the same thing. That's one of the hardest parts of this job. Elijah spent her lunch break researching housing laws and advocacy organizations. She discovered a nonprofit that helped families transition to new housing and connected the client with their services. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it gave the family options. "You did good work on that case," Maria told her at the end of the day. "But we couldn't save their apartment." "No, we couldn't, but we helped them understand their options and connected them with resources." Sometimes that's all we can do. Is that enough? It has to be, because the alternative is doing nothing. On the last day of her internship, Maria asked Alaya to reflect on her experience. What did you learn this summer? That being a lawyer is more complicated than I thought. There are a lot of problems the law can't solve. True. What else? That even when you can't solve a problem completely, you can still make a difference. Even small differences matter to the people you're helping. Also true. And Alaya thought about all the clients she'd met, all the stories she'd heard, all the times she'd felt frustrated by the system's limitations. That I still want to do this work, maybe more than I did before. Maria smiled. Why? Because now I understand what I'm really signing up for. It's not about winning every case or saving everyone. It's about showing up for people when they need someone to show up. When Alaya returned to Harborview Academy for her sophomore year, she felt different. The school looked the same, but her perspective had changed. She was less concerned with fitting in, and more focused on what she wanted to contribute. She started a peer mediation program to help students resolve conflicts without involving teachers or administrators. She organized monthly visits to the local nursing home, where students could spend time with elderly residents who rarely had visitors. She continued to intervene when she saw students being bullied or excluded. Her grades remained excellent, but her teachers noticed something else: a new maturity in her thinking, a deeper understanding of complex issues. In her American history class, they were discussing the civil rights movement. "Who can tell me why the Montgomery bus boycott was effective?" asked Mrs. Patterson. Several students raised their hands, offering textbook answers about economic pressure and organized resistance. "Alaya," Mrs. Patterson said. "What do you think?" "I think it worked because people were willing to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves," Alaya said. "It would have been easier for individual people to just keep riding the bus and accepting unfair treatment, but they decided that short-term inconvenience was worth long-term change." "Can you give me an example of that kind of sacrifice?" Alaya thought about her summer at the legal aid office, about Maria working long hours for a fraction of what corporate lawyers made, about clients who kept fighting, even when the system seemed stacked against them. "My supervisor this summer could have made more money at a big law firm, but she chose to represent people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Every day she chose helping people over making money. That's the same kind of sacrifice, just on a smaller scale." "That's an excellent connection," Mrs. Patterson said. "Can anyone think of examples in their own lives where they've had to choose between what's easy and what's right?" The discussion that followed was more thoughtful and personal than their usual class conversations. Students talked about times they'd stood up for friends, admitted mistakes, or chosen difficult paths because they were the right paths. After class, Blake Morrison approached Alaya. "That was really insightful," he said. "About the sacrifice thing. Thanks. Can I ask you something? Do you ever regret leaving your old school? I mean, things might have been easier if you'd stayed." Alaya considered the question. "Easier in some ways, harder in others. But I've learned that easier's isn't always better." "What do you mean?" "At my old school, I was angry a lot. I felt like the world was unfair and there was nothing I could do about it. Here, I'm learning that the world is unfair, but there are things I can do about it. That's harder in some ways, because it means I have responsibilities I didn't have before. But it's also better, because it means I have power I didn't have before." Blake nodded slowly. "I never thought about it like that. Most people don't have to think about it. If you're born with advantages, you don't usually question the system that gave them to you." "Is that what you think about me, that I don't question anything?" Alaya looked at Blake carefully. Over the past year she'd watched him evolve from someone who'd initially dismissed her to someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding different perspectives. "I think you're learning to question things. That's more than a lot of people do. Can I tell you something?" "Sure. When you first got here, I thought you were just another charity case, someone who'd be grateful to be here, and wouldn't cause any trouble. And now I think you're probably the most important person in our class." "Why?"
Because you challenge us. You make us think about things we've never had to think about. You make us better. That conversation stayed with Aliyah as she continued through high school. She began to understand that her role wasn't just to succeed in this new environment, but to change it. She wasn't there to become like everyone else, she was there to show everyone else what they could become. During her junior year she was elected student body president. Her platform focused on making the school more inclusive and addressing issues like bullying, food insecurity among scholarship students, and mental health support. Her first major initiative was a mentorship program pairing upperclassmen with younger students who were struggling academically or socially. She drew on her experience helping Jamie Chen and other students who'd been bullied or excluded. The goal isn't just to help students catch up, she explained to the faculty committee reviewing her proposal. It's to create a culture where helping each other is normal, where students look out for each other instead of competing against each other. The program was approved and became one of the school's most successful student-led initiatives. By her senior year, Aliyah had been accepted to several prestigious universities with full scholarships, but the school she was most excited about was Georgetown, which had an exceptional public interest law program. At her high school graduation, she was chosen as the student speaker. Standing at the podium, looking out at her classmates and their families, she felt the weight of how far she'd come. 4 years ago, she began, I walked into this school, feeling like I didn't belong. I was right, I didn't belong. Not because I wasn't smart enough or good enough, but because this place needed to change, and I was here to help change it. When people ask me about my time here, they expect me to talk about how grateful I am for the opportunity I was given, and I am grateful. But gratitude isn't enough. Gratitude without action is just politeness. The opportunity I was given came with responsibility. The responsibility to use my education not just to improve my own life, but to improve the lives of others. The responsibility to remember where I came from, and to help other people get where they want to go. Each of you has been given advantages, whether it's this education, your family's support, or your natural talents. The question isn't whether you're grateful for those advantages, the question is what you're going to do with them. Are you going to use your privilege to maintain the status quo, or are you going to use it to create change? Are you going to build walls that keep people out, or bridges that bring people together? I've learned that real success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many people you bring with you. In the audience, David Whitmore dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Next to him, Janet Johnson beamed with pride, her arm around Marcus, who was now in middle school himself. After the ceremony, David approached Aliyah's family. I have something for you, he said, handing Aliyah an envelope. Inside was a card with a photo of Robert Whitmore, smiling and wearing the jacket Aliyah had given him that cold night in the park. He wanted you to have this, David said. He still talks about the kind girl who shared her coat with him. How is he doing? Some days are better than others, but he's comfortable, and he knows he's loved. And he still wears your jacket sometimes, when it's cold. Aliyah looked at the photo, remembering the lost, confused man she'd found in the park. I'm glad he's okay. Aliyah, David said seriously, I want you to know that investing in your education has been the best decision I've ever made. Not because of your grades or your achievements, but because of who you've become. You've changed this school, you've changed the students here, and I know you're going to change the world. I'm going to try.
I know you are, and when you do, remember that it all started with a simple choice to help someone who needed help. 4 years later, Aliyah graduated from Georgetown with a degree in government and a minor in social justice. She'd spent her summers working with legal aid organizations, advocacy groups, and community nonprofits. She'd also maintained her connection to Harborview Academy, returning regularly to speak to students and mentor scholarship recipients. Law school was challenging but fulfilling. She specialized in civil rights and housing law, inspired by her summer internship years earlier. During her second year, she worked on a case involving discriminatory lending practices that resulted in a significant settlement for affected families. In her third year she was selected for a prestigious fellowship with a legal advocacy organization focused on systemic inequality. Her supervisor was Maria Santos, the same attorney who'd mentored her during her high school internship. Full circle, Maria said when Aaliyah walked into her office on her first day. I was hoping you'd remember me. Hard to forget someone who challenged me as much as you did. Are you ready to challenge me some more? Absolutely. Aaliyah's first major case as a law student involved a family facing eviction remarkably similar to the case that had frustrated her as a teenager. But this time she was armed with more knowledge and experience. Working with Maria, she researched the landlord's history and discovered a pattern of targeting low-income tenants with sudden rent increases. They built a case alleging discriminatory practices and were able to secure not just housing for their client but policy changes that protected other tenants. How does it feel to actually win one? Maria asked after the settlement was finalized. Good, Aaliyah said. But also like it's just the beginning. What do you mean? This one case helped this one family. But there are thousands of families facing the same situation. How do we help all of them? One case at a time, one family at a time, one policy change at a time. Is that enough? Maria smiled, remembering asking Aaliyah the same question years earlier. It has to be. Because the alternative is doing nothing. After passing the bar exam, Aaliyah was offered positions at several prestigious law firms. The salaries were impressive, enough to pay off her student loans quickly and provide financial security she'd never known. But she turned them all down. Instead, she joined a small legal aid clinic in her old neighborhood, not far from the apartment building where she'd grown up. Her starting salary was a fraction of what the corporate firms had offered, but she had something more valuable, the opportunity to represent people who reminded her of her younger self. Her first client was a 12-year-old girl whose family was facing eviction. The girl sat in Aaliyah's office, wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, and shoes with worn soles, looking overwhelmed and scared. "What's your name?" Aaliyah asked gently. "Isabella," the girl said quietly. "Isabella, I'm going to tell you something important. You and your family are not going to face this alone. We're going to figure out how to help you, okay?" Isabella nodded, tears in her eyes. "Can I ask you something, Isabella? What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to be a teacher, so I can help kids learn." "That's a wonderful goal. And you know what? Having big dreams and working hard to achieve them, that's something no one can ever take away from you, no matter where you live or what challenges your family faces." After Isabella and her mother left, Aaliyah sat in her office thinking about the conversation. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to David Whitmore's contact information. "David, it's Aaliyah. Aaliyah, how's the new job going?" "It's perfect. Challenging but perfect. I'm proud of you. Are you calling to update me on your first week?" "Actually, I'm calling because I might have found someone who could use the kind of help you gave me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tell me more." "Her name is Isabella Rodriguez. She's 12, she wants to be a teacher, and her family is facing some challenges. I'm handling their legal case, but I think she might benefit from the same kind of educational opportunities you provided for me. You want me to pay for another student's education. I want you to consider it, but more than that, I want to start a program. A scholarship fund for students who show promise but face obstacles. We could partner with schools, identify kids who would benefit, provide not just tuition but mentoring and support." David was quiet for a moment. "That's a bigger vision than just helping one student." "Yes, it is. But I learned from you that individual acts of kindness can ripple outward. What if we made those ripples bigger? What would you call this program?" Aaliyah looked at the photo on her desk, the one of Robert Whitmore wearing her old jacket. "The Bridge Foundation. Because we're building bridges between where people are and where they want to go." 6 months later, the Bridge Foundation awarded its first 10 scholarships to students from underprivileged backgrounds who showed academic promise and community leadership potential. Isabella Rodriguez was one of the recipients. At the scholarship ceremony held at Harborview Academy, Aaliyah stood at the same podium where she'd given her graduation speech. "Each of you is here because someone saw potential in you," she told the scholarship recipients. "But potential isn't enough. These scholarships come with responsibility, the responsibility to work hard, to help others, and to remember that your success belongs not just to you but to your communities. Years ago I was where you are now. Someone took a chance on me, and it changed my life. But it didn't just change my life, it changed the lives of everyone I've been able to help since then. Your success will create more success. Your achievements will create more opportunities. Your kindness will create more kindness. That's how change really happens. Not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through individual people choosing to help other individual people. Through bridges built one connection at a time. In the audience, Robert Whitmore sat in his wheelchair, wearing a newer jacket, but still carrying the memory of a cold night when a young girl had shared her warmth with a stranger. Next to him, David wiped away tears as he watched the woman that girl had become. Marcus, now a sophomore at Harborview Academy himself and a Bridge Foundation scholarship recipient, leaned over to his mother. "Mama, do you think Dad would be proud of Ollie?" Janet squeezed her son's hand. "Baby, your daddy always said she was going to change the world. I think he'd say she's right on schedule." As Aaliyah concluded her speech, she looked out at the young faces staring back at her, faces filled with hope and determination, and the same mix of fear and excitement she'd felt years earlier. "Remember," she said, "it all starts with a choice. The choice to see someone who needs help and to help them. The choice to believe that things can be better, and to work to make them better. The choice to build bridges instead of walls. Make that choice every day, and you'll discover what I discovered, that the girl who helps others becomes the woman who changes everything." The applause was thunderous, but what stayed with Aaliyah was the look in Isabella's eyes, the same look she'd had when David first told her about Harborview Academy. The look of someone who finally believed that dreams could become reality. Later that evening, at the reception, a middle-aged woman approached Aaliyah. "Excuse me, are you Aaliyah Johnson?" "Yes, my name is Patricia Morrison. Blake Morrison is my son." Aaliyah smiled. "Blake, how is he doing?" "He's doing well. He's a prosecutor now, specializing in juvenile justice. He says you inspired him to think about law as a way to help people rather than just make money." "Blake inspired me too. He showed me that people can change their perspectives when they're willing to listen and learn. He wanted me to give you this." Patricia handed Aaliyah an envelope. "He couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted you to know how much your friendship meant to him." Inside the envelope was a card with a simple message: "Thank you for teaching me that success isn't about how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you. Keep building bridges, Blake." As Aaliyah drove home that night, she passed through her old neighborhood. The streets looked smaller than she remembered, but not unfamiliar. She pulled over near the park where she'd found Robert Whitmore all those years ago. The bench where he'd sat was still there, under the same streetlight. Aaliyah sat down and pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos from the evening. Pictures of scholarship recipients with their families, of David and Robert, of her mother and Marcus. Her phone buzzed with a text message from one of her current clients: "Miss Johnson, thank you for helping my family keep our home. My daughter says when she grows up, she wants to be a lawyer just like you." Aaliyah smiled, thinking about the ripple effects that David had talked about years earlier. Every person helped could help someone else. Every bridge built could support the building of more bridges. She stood up from the bench and walked back to her car, but paused for a moment to look up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. "Thank you," she said quietly, not sure if she was talking to her father, or David, or Robert, or just the universe in general. As she drove home, her phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number. "Hi David, Aaliyah, I wanted to thank you for tonight. Seeing those kids receive their scholarships, it reminded me why we started this foundation." "It reminded me too. Did you see Isabella's face when she got her award?" "I did. She looked exactly like you did that day in my office when I first told you about Harborview Academy." "Scared but hopeful, determined," David corrected. "Even when you were scared, you were determined. Just like she is." Aaliyah pulled into her apartment building's parking lot, a much nicer building than where she'd grown up, but still in the same general neighborhood. She'd chosen to stay close to her roots, close to the community she served. "David, can I ask you something I've always wondered about?" "Of course. That night when you came to pick up your father, why did you really decide to help me? Was it just gratitude, or was there something else?" David was quiet for a moment. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always. When I walked into your family's apartment that night, I saw something I'd lost sight of. I saw people who had very little but were still willing to share it with a stranger. I saw a 12-year-old girl who gave away her only jacket because someone else needed it more." "Okay, Aaliyah, I'd spent years telling myself that my wealth was earned, that I deserved what I had because I'd worked hard for it, and I had worked hard.
But seeing your family that night made me realize that hard work wasn't the only factor. I'd also been lucky to be born into a family with resources, lucky to get a good education, lucky to have opportunities that weren't available to everyone. So you helped me out of guilt? No, I helped you because I recognized something rare. You could have walked past my father in that park, most people would have, but you didn't, even though helping him cost you something. That told me you had character that couldn't be taught in any school. Aaliyah sat in her car, engine off, processing David's words. What I realized, David continued, was that I'd been given advantages not just so I could succeed, but so I could use that success to create opportunities for others. You reminded me of that responsibility. And now I see dozens of young people getting chances they might not have had otherwise. I see you building a legal career focused on justice rather than profit. I see Marcus excelling at Harborview Academy and talking about becoming a social worker. I see ripple effects I never could have imagined. After they hung up, Aaliyah sat in her car for a few more minutes, thinking about ripple effects and responsibility and the strange way that individual moments could change everything. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Isabella. Miss Johnson, thank you for tonight. I promise I won't waste this chance. Aaliyah typed back, you couldn't waste it if you tried. Just remember to help others along the way. I will, just like you did. Aaliyah smiled and finally got out of her car. As she walked toward her apartment building, she noticed a young boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the front steps. He looked upset, and he was shivering slightly in the evening air. Are you okay? She asked, approaching carefully. The boy looked up. I locked myself out. My mom won't be home from work until midnight, and I don't have anywhere to go. Aaliyah looked at the boy, noting his worn clothes, his thin jacket, the way he was trying not to cry, and felt a familiar tug in her chest. What's your name? Miguel. Miguel. I'm Aaliyah. I live in this building. Would you like to come up to my apartment where it's warm? You can call your mom and let her know you're safe. Miguel hesitated, clearly having been taught not to go with strangers. Or, Aaliyah said, I could sit out here with you until your mom gets home. I don't mind. Something in her tone must have convinced him. Could I come inside? I'm really cold. Of course. As they walked up the stairs to her apartment, Miguel said quietly, my mom always tells me not to talk to strangers. That's good advice. Your mom sounds smart. Then why are you helping me? Aaliyah paused on the landing, thinking about how to explain. Because sometimes people need help, and sometimes you're the person who's there to help them. The trick is learning to tell the difference between someone who genuinely needs help and someone who might want to hurt you. How do you tell the difference? Experience, mostly, and trusting your instincts. What do your instincts tell you about me? Miguel considered this seriously, that you're safe, and that you understand what it's like to be scared. Both true. In her apartment, Aaliyah gave Miguel a blanket and a cup of hot chocolate while he called his mother. She could hear the relief in the woman's voice through the phone, followed by gratitude when Miguel explained where he was. She wants to talk to you, Miguel said, handing over the phone. Hello, this is Aaliyah, Miss Johnson. This is Carmen Rodriguez, Miguel's mother. I can't thank you enough for helping my son. Of course, he's safe and warm. I feel terrible that I wasn't there when he got home from school. I work 2 jobs, and sometimes the timing. Carmen's voice trailed off. No judgment here, Aaliyah said gently. We all do what we have to do to take care of our families. Miguel said you live in the building. I think we might be neighbors. I'm in apartment 2B. I'm in 3A. And actually, Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm a lawyer. If you ever need legal advice or help with anything, please don't hesitate to ask. I specialize in helping families navigate housing issues, employment problems, things like that. Thank you. That's very kind. After Carmen arrived to pick up Miguel, a tired-looking woman in a restaurant uniform, who hugged her son tightly and thanked Aaliyah repeatedly. Aaliyah reflected on the evening. Here she was, 26 years old, supposedly a successful attorney, and she was still encountering children who needed help, families struggling to make ends meet, people facing the same challenges she'd grown up with. The difference was that now she had tools to help, not just kindness and good intentions, but legal knowledge, professional connections, and financial resources. The Bridge Foundation was helping students get better educational opportunities, but there were still families dealing with immediate crises. Aaliyah pulled out her laptop and began researching community legal clinics, neighborhood resource centers, and after-school programs. Maybe there was more she could do beyond just her individual legal practice and the scholarship program. Over the next several months, Aaliyah found herself thinking more and more about systemic solutions. Her legal cases were helping individual families, but she was seeing patterns: the same landlords causing problems for multiple tenants, the same employers taking advantage of workers, the same systems failing the same types of people over and over again. She started documenting these patterns, building a database of information that revealed larger trends. When she had enough data, she reached out to investigative journalists, policy advocates, and community organizers. The result was a series of newspaper articles exposing discriminatory practices in housing and employment, followed by policy changes at the city level. Several problematic landlords were forced to reform their practices, and new protections were put in place for vulnerable tenants. "You're thinking bigger," Maria observed during one of their monthly mentor meetings. "Individual cases, scholarship programs, and now policy advocacy. What's next?" "I don't know yet," Aaliyah admitted, "but I keep thinking about something David told me years ago, about ripple effects. Every action creates more actions. Every person helped can help someone else. And I want to create bigger ripples." The opportunity came sooner than she expected. The mayor's office announced an opening for a new position, Director of Community Justice Initiatives. The role involved coordinating between legal aid organizations, schools, community groups, and city departments to address systemic inequality. Several people encouraged Aaliyah to apply, but she hesitated. Taking the job would mean leaving direct legal practice, at least temporarily. It would mean less time working with individual clients, and more time in meetings and writing policy proposals. She was discussing the decision with her family over Sunday dinner when Marcus, now a senior at Harborview Academy, offered his perspective. "Aaliyah, remember when you first started at the academy, and you felt like you had to choose between fitting in and staying true to yourself? Yeah, and you figured out that you didn't have to choose, you could stay true to yourself and change the environment around you. Right. This feels like the same thing. You don't have to choose between helping individual people and helping the system that affects all those people. You can do both." "When did you get so wise?" Aaliyah asked. "I learned from watching you," Marcus said simply. Aaliyah applied for the position, and after a rigorous interview process, was offered the job. Her first initiative was to create neighborhood legal clinics that brought services directly to communities that needed them most. The clinics were staffed by attorneys from various organizations and law students from local universities. Isabella Rodriguez, now a sophomore at Harborview Academy, volunteered at one of the clinics as part of her community service requirement. She helped with translation, childcare, and administrative tasks. "Miss Johnson," Isabella said one Saturday afternoon after a busy clinic day, "I've been thinking about what you said when we first met, about dreams that no one can take away. What about it? I still want to be a teacher, but I also want to do what you do. Help people with legal problems. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You could teach law, or work on education policy, or run programs that teach people about their legal rights." Isabella's eyes lit up. "I hadn't thought about combining them like that. One of the most important things I've learned is that you don't have to choose just one way to help people. There are as many ways as there are people who need help." "Is that why you took this new job? To help people in a different way?" "Partly, but also because I realized that individual solutions, while important, aren't enough. If we want real change, we have to address the systems that create problems in the first place." "That sounds hard." "It is hard. But you know what? Everything worthwhile is hard. Going to Harborview Academy was hard. Becoming a lawyer was hard. Standing up to bullies is hard, but hard doesn't mean impossible." As Isabella walked away to help clean up the clinic, Aaliyah thought about how many conversations like this she'd had over the years, with scholarship recipients, with clients, with young people who were trying to figure out how to make their mark on the world. Each conversation was a seed planted, a bridge built, a ripple started, and slowly, steadily, those ripples were creating waves of change. Her phone rang, David calling with his weekly check-in. "How was the clinic today?" he asked. "Busy. We helped 43 families with various issues: housing problems, employment disputes, immigration questions, benefit applications. 43 families in one day. Do you ever think about the multiplier effect of that?" "What do you mean?" "Each of those families probably includes 2 to 4 people, so you potentially affected the lives of over 100 people today. And if even half of those families avoid serious legal problems because of the help you provided, think about how that changes their children's futures, their communities, their ability to help others." Aaliyah had never calculated it that way, but David's math was compelling. "When you put it like that, it does feel significant." "It is significant. Aaliyah, I want you to know something. When I first decided to help you, I thought I was making an investment in one person's education. I had no idea I was actually investing in a movement." "A movement?" "Look around you. The Bridge Foundation has awarded scholarships to 87 students in 5 years. Your legal clinic model is being replicated in 3 other cities. The policy changes you helped bring about have affected thousands of families. The students you mentored are now mentoring others." David paused, and it all started with a 12-year-old girl who saw an old man who needed help and decided to help him. After they hung up, Aaliyah walked to her window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were Bridge Foundation scholarship recipients studying for exams. Somewhere out there were families living in better housing because of policy changes she'd advocated for. Somewhere out there were kids who'd learned to stand up for themselves because older students had intervened on their behalf. She thought about Robert Whitmore, now in his 80s, who still told stories about the kind girl who shared her jacket. She thought about her mother, who'd parlayed her experience at Whitmore Industries into a career in nonprofit administration. She thought about Marcus, who was planning to study social work so he could help families navigate complex systems. She thought about Miguel from downstairs, who now knocked on her door sometimes just to say hello and tell her about school. She thought about Isabella, dreaming of combining law and education to help even more people. And she thought about all the people she hadn't met yet, all the bridges still to be built, all the ripples still to be started. Her laptop chimed with an email. The subject line read, "Thank you from a grateful parent, Miss Johnson." The email began, "You don't know me, but you helped my daughter last year when our landlord was trying to evict us illegally. Because of your help, we were able to stay in our home, and my daughter didn't have to change schools in the middle of her senior year. She graduated last month and starts college in the fall on a full scholarship. She wants to study social justice. She says she wants to help people the way you helped us. I thought you should know that your work is inspiring the next generation of helpers. Thank you for everything you do." Aaliyah smiled and saved the email in a folder labeled Reminders, messages she kept for days when the work felt overwhelming or futile. She opened a new document and began typing Annual Report, Year 5, the Bridge Foundation and Community Legal Initiative. As she wrote, summarizing the year's accomplishments and challenges, she realized that she was no longer the scared 12-year-old who'd wondered if she belonged at Harborview Academy. She was no longer the uncertain teenager who'd worried about being good enough to deserve the opportunities she'd been given. She had become exactly what David had seen in her that night in her family's small apartment, someone who used whatever advantages she'd been given to create advantages for others. But more than that, she had become part of something larger than herself, a network of people who believed that individual acts of kindness could add up to systemic change, a community of helpers helping others become helpers. She thought again of Robert Whitmore in the park, confused and lost and cold. Such a small moment, really. One girl deciding to share her jacket with one old man. But that small moment had created this moment, a successful attorney writing reports about programs that had helped hundreds of families in an apartment she could afford because of opportunities that began with that single act of kindness. Tomorrow, she would review applications from the newest group of Bridge Foundation candidates. Tomorrow, she would meet with city officials about expanding the legal clinic program. Tomorrow, she would continue building bridges between where people were and where they wanted to go. But tonight, she was content to sit in her comfortable apartment, writing about the power of individual choices to create collective change, knowing that somewhere in the city, other people were making their own choices to help, to stand up, to share what they had with those who needed it. The girl who had once collected cans to help her family pay rent had become the woman who collected stories of transformation, hope, and the endless human capacity for kindness. And in a memory care facility across town, an elderly man with Alzheimer's disease slept peacefully, wearing a thin jacket that had once belonged to a 12-year-old girl who understood that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. The jacket was threadbare now, but it still carried the memory of that December night, when a small act of compassion had started ripples that were still spreading, still growing, still changing lives, one choice at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.